Welcome, I'm Tommaso Ridani, and this is Story Scanner, a podcast based on the stories headlining Via Sarfatti 25, the magazine from Bocconi University, with analysis and insights from Bocconi professors and researchers on the big topics in business, management, data science and politics. In this episode, we take a look at startups and their exit strategies, how entrepreneurs decide, or should decide, when is the best time to sell. For many startups, a lucrative exit is the final goal, the culmination of a journey that started with an innovative idea and has gone through several rounds of financing, milestones, periods of despair and moments of euphoria. And timing the exit is a make or break decision in most cases. In choosing when to sell, in fact, startups face a trade-off. In some cases, startups prefer to be acquired, often by large industry incumbents or private equity firms, during the idea development phase, when the technology or product has yet to be perfected. In other circumstances, startups go into stealth mode, aiming for a late exit, initially seeking financing, but only revealing themselves to potential buyers at a later stage. In other cases, startups adopt flexible strategies, immediately scouting for early buyers, but eventually opting for a late sale. Thus, the decision is very complex. Startups face a dilemma between selling early at a lower price or investing in the development of their invention into a proper innovation and selling later at a higher price. But only if they survive. And the question is very topical. Despite the global pandemic, in fact, the last 2 years have witnessed an exuberant market for startup sales. In the technology sector, for example, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Google and Microsoft alone have acquired more than 60 companies since January 2020. Many of them startups funded in the new millennium. Andrea Fosfuri, Professor of Technology and Innovation Management at Bocconi, with co-authors Ashish Arora and Thomas Ronde, has recently published in Management Science Journal a study that analyzes how startups decide when to sell, which startups can best afford to wait until their idea is developed into a proper innovation, and which have to commit to the early, less lucrative market. He tells us what the study highlights regards the trade-off for startups in deciding to try the early market, when a startup has only a patent or a prototype, or developing the invention for the late market, with a functioning technology or a viable product.
Let me start with two observations. First, in 95% of the cases, large corporations like the ones were mentioned before have greater ability than startups to profit from the innovative ideas. They possess financial resources, strong brand names, large distribution channels, production and marketing competencies that are often reusable for scaling up the startup project. Thus, an exit creates the most value in this case. Second, in the life cycle of startup, there are often inflection points that are where the decision about exit becomes more salient. The startup has secured 3 potential business customers. Should it pull the plug, or should it seek for more customers? A round of financing was successful. Should it exit? Or should it go for another round? The decision about selling the business or continuing eventually selling later is thus critical and very salient for most startups. Our research shows that it entails a trade-off. An early sale would reduce the risk that the project fails. Startups are typically resource constrained, and when they try to scale up, they are often prone to execution errors, for instance, hiring the wrong people or exploring the wrong market. If acquired, the project is more likely to succeed because it benefits from the scale-up capabilities of the buyer. In this sense, an early sale creates value by reducing failure risk. On the other hand, it's typically difficult to acquire early-stage startups. Only few buyers have the capability or a dedicated unit that scans the landscape for early acquisitions. Think about university startup. An incumbent of a large corporation need scientific capability to acquire it. The implication is that there are fewer buyers for early-stage startups than for late-stage startups. A large number of buyers has 2 important effects. It increases value creation because it is more likely that a given buyer finds the startup idea valuable or very valuable. It gives more option to the startup for negotiating higher price, thus the startup has a higher bargaining power. Therefore, we have a trade-off between selling early at a lower price versus selling late at a higher price, but only if the startup survives.
The study also looks at the main factors affecting the exit timing.
Many factors change this trade-off and impact on the exit timing. The startup team. Team can be more capable or less capable. For instance, a team of scientists combined with a Bocconi graduate would be more capable than a team of just scientists. Our research shows that a more capable team will work head down to further develop the idea to seek a late exit. Less capable teams have instead fewer options and need to develop a strategy around an early exit, perhaps focusing their scarce resources for increasing their visibility with potential buyers. Interesting enough, teams of intermediate capability will do better if they do not put all their eggs in one basket and try to seek early buyers, but work on developing their idea further. Second, intellectual property right protection. Intellectual property right protection, like for instance patents, are crucial for startups. Otherwise, they risk that their idea is misappropriated when they deal with potential buyers. We show that having a patent favors an approach in which the startups seeks both early buyers but keep working on the development of the idea. That is, stronger patent protection makes less relevant the choice about the timing of exit and thus gives flexibility to the startup. Finally, the human touch. Founders have sometimes strong preferences. For instance, they might want to be on the driving seat or have full control of the development of their idea. If that is the case, our research shows that startups are sold later and are able to negotiate higher price. However, their failure probability also increases. Ultimately, while there is no single path to success, developing a strategy around the timing of exit is imperative for all technology startups.
Federico Isenburg, a Bocconi alumnus, in 2007 founded Easy Welfare, a provider of corporate welfare services, which in the arch of 12 years reached a turnover of over 11 million euros. In 2019, he sold Easy Welfare to Edenred. Last year, the entrepreneur acquired a large majority of Nutribees, an Italian startup active in the food delivery sector, together with Mega Holding, which completed the acquisition of the entire share capital. From his personal experience, Federico tells us about the factors in deciding the best exit timing, and also, apart from the more financial aspects, what personal feelings are involved in the process.
Yeah, we decided to sell the company after more than 1 year of process because we arrived to the decision to sell the company. The real reason that took us to sell the company is the financial aspect, because the company was sold for more than 50 million euros, and the valuation of my financial shareholders was less than 3 million euros. So they made a very big deal, and so we decided to sell the company. And from my point of view, was really hard to take this decision, because in the decision to sell the company, you have the personal aspect and the financial aspect, and the most difficult things for my personal opinion is to decide to sell the company and to effort what happened after the deal, because 1 second before that you sign the deal, you are the CEO of a company of 200 employees. You have a relation with a lot of people, with a lot of customer, and you are in the middle of a system that it works, and the day after you are again a normal person who is quite rich, but has no reason to in his work, and so you have to reinvent your position from zero, and so this was very hard for me. Anyway, at the end, I'm quite happy to have sold the company. I begin now a new venture, and so it's okay. But when you decide to sell the company, you have to think. I think that the most important thing is to really realize that the day after you have to restart again from zero.
While from his new viewpoint as a buyer, he can tell us about the most important factors and critical aspects when you take on board a startup.
Yeah, when you take on board a startup, or anyway, when you begin when you enter in a company, you have to assure that you don't break anything, because and this was very interesting for us from the Easy Welfare experience, because who bought the company, enter in the company and destroyed all the process and change everything, and the spirit of the company will disappear in a really few months. So when we onboarded the startup, I enter really in a silent mood, and I looked to what was happening in the first 2 months, 3 months, really. To take carefully to maintain the culture, to see how it works, and to understand how the company works. And you begin to move the first decision according to with the founder, because every time that you take a decision, you are changing something that was not organized from the founder. So you have to be very careful to not to destroy anything. And so the first 3 months we were really, me and my colleague, we were really take careful to not to make something wrong, and to see how it works. And then when we understood how it works, we begin to take the first decision. We take the first people, and so we began to work on the company and to create something new.
We are now joined by Nico Valenti Gatto, Operating Director of B4i, Bocconi for Innovation, the Bocconi University Hub, which offers selected startups pre-acceleration and acceleration programs. He also has experience in a startup and in venture capital. He gives us his viewpoint on if and how very early stage entrepreneurs should think about an exit.
Yes, so in my experience, which isn't the most vast in the world, but I have seen a few startups entrepreneurs, I've always found that those who reach the highest levels of success are those who focus on building something that clients and users really, really want. And this will bring priority in the way in which the project should be executed, and therefore brought to market, and therefore eventually increase sales in whichever format that may come. So this means that they're not initially thinking about how they can exit or who could be an acquirer of their business. I mean, obviously that's something that further down the line will be interesting to think about, but the main objective is not to build something that they will necessarily want to sell in terms of the company. They want to build a product or a service that can sell. And as a positive side effect, at some point in the future, this can attract the interest of certain potential acquirers that can lead to an exit. But the focus and the obsession of the entrepreneurs has to be in building a product or a service that can eventually also sell itself, because it satisfies a need that is so urgent that the market desperately needs a solution to this need and this problem. In fact, if we look at the so-called unicorns today, and in France there have been some very recent examples, and France is a European country that I think we should look at carefully because of the remarkable progress it's been making over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The founders, some of whom I've actually been lucky to meet and know through my previous job in the venture capital fund that I worked with, in no way were they thinking about an exit when they started the business. Let's think about Alan. Let's think about Lydia. They were thinking about, how do I build an appropriate workplace culture so that I know who to recruit and how I want them to work. I need to build a solution that is absolutely the best in class in the market, that will be better than whatever's available today. And they still haven't exited, but they are considered as unicorns. And they're not thinking about exiting at the moment. They're still thinking about growing their business. So if anything, being able to grow your business without having to go for an exit is a sign that the market is allowing you to grow your business, because you're being able to find funds, or you're selling enough to fund yourself and keep on growing. So exits are clearly fundamental, and they're a fantastic indicator of the wealth and maturity of a market. But they are by no means the only sign of success. So eventually VC funds clearly need to exit, and they need to give money back to their investors, and exits or IPOs are the way to do that. But that's all I'm saying is, founders shouldn't start their business thinking about that from day one.
So that's the approach of founders and entrepreneurs. But what about the approach of buyers?
Well, that's clearly a different approach. And as I was saying earlier, exits are one of the main, indicators of a mature and attractive market. Buyers, for attractive exits to happen, you need to have buyers willing to pay large sums of money, and I mean very large sums of money, to make the headlines. So this means that you need to have large corporates, usually, that are willing to trust the new technology, the new business models, and the founders, and be willing to fork out the cash for these businesses. And this has to happen while competing with US corporates who have historically been in the position to pay much more, and now also have to say Asian corporates, which are also paying immense sums of money for companies bringing about exits that, as I was saying earlier, make the headlines, because we're talking about extremely large amounts that go well beyond the hundreds of millions of euros, but also in the billion euro mark. So for exits to attract further investments and to inspire further talent, they also have to take place with the right timing, with the right valuations, and in a way that shows entrepreneurs that there are buyers out there when the time is right for an exit to happen, willing to pay the necessary amounts of money.
I hope you enjoyed hearing about startups and their decision-making on exit strategies. You can read more about this topic and many others in the new issue of Via Sarfatti 25 magazine, with opinion, research and insights from Bocconi professors and researchers. I'm Tommaso Eridani, and I hope you'll join me again for the next episode of Story Scanner.